So, herzlich willkommen. Ich heiße Sie herzlich willkommen. Mein Name ist Scheelen. Ich bin hier im süddeutschen Raum, direkt an der Schweizer Grenze, für Sie aktiv. Joe Folkman, der in Utah sitzt und schon sich freut, diese Premiere der Studie, wir haben es genannt, Leadership Made in Germany, sind deutsche Führungskräfte noch zu retten? Da steckt natürlich schon ein bisschen Provokation drin, Ihnen heute vorzustellen. Ich freue mich natürlich sehr. Wir arbeiten mit Zenger Folkman schon seit circa 8 Jahren zusammen. Ich habe das Unternehmen auch vorher lange Zeit beobachtet und mir regelmäßig die White Paper runtergeladen, und was mich halt sehr interessiert und begeistert hat, ist natürlich die große Leadership-Basis, Führungskräftebasis von mittlerweile 60.000, damals waren es noch knapp 30.000 Führungskräften. Und diese Studien auch, wo vor allen Dingen die Führungskompetenz auch mit konkreten Ergebnissen wie Engagement, Kundenzufriedenheit, Profit und so weiter einhergehen, war für uns schon immer interessant, haben wir auch übersetzt und nutzen diese Ideen natürlich auch für unsere eigenen Kundenprojekten. Und das Ganze basiert ja auf dem Buch Extraordinary Leadership von Joe Folkman. Wir haben heute die Möglichkeit, erstmalig nicht nur international diese Studienergebnisse zu bekommen, sondern wir haben in den letzten Jahren 450 deutsche Führungskräfte über unterschiedliche Branchen. Oder wenn ich über deutsche Führungskräfte spreche, so sind es primär Leute aus der Dachregion. Wir haben Prio 1 ist Deutschland, dann Österreich und dann Schweiz, wo wir diese Daten erheben konnten. Und wir freuen uns natürlich, diese Ergebnisse jetzt genau mit Ihnen zu teilen. Folgendermaßen ist der Ablauf. Ich würde gleich das Wort direkt an Joe Folkman übergeben. Er wird dann in Englisch selbstverständlich die Studien und Charts und die Ergebnisse Ihnen vorstellen. Und wir haben dann zum Schluss nochmal so ein Summary. Und ich würde dann auch einige Fragen von meiner Seite auch nochmal als Abschluss stellen. Und Sie haben natürlich, ich glaube, das ist ganz wichtig für alle Beteiligten, auch die Möglichkeit, diese Erkenntnisse, diese Studien und diese Präsentation nachher auch von uns zu bekommen. Plus wir geben Ihnen auch weitere White Paper, die wir bereits in vorherigen Studien zusammengestellt haben. Yes, hello Joe. This was a short German introduction here from South Germany. If I'm right, you are sitting in Utah. How is the weather in Utah? And can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is coming for the next close 1 hour to our participants here in Germany? We are very interesting to hear about German managers and if there is any future for German manager, if you take a look to their competencies, and especially when we compare them to international managers. Joe, what is your comment?
Thank you, Frank, and it's a delight to be here. It's a beautiful day here in Utah. The snow is melting, and so we're just hitting flood stage today. But we don't have big floods here. The rivers are very high. We had a lot of snow this winter, and so it's a delight to be with you. And thank you, Frank, for setting this up and for the work that you do. Frank is one of our best strategic partners. We have partners all over the world that represent us, and Frank has done a great job in Germany. And professionally, I'm a psychometrician. My partner, Jack Zenger, he actually is in Madrid today. So we travel around the world a little bit, and it's a delight to be able to share this information with you today and get any insights. We have just under 500 leaders from Germany. We think it's a good sample. We think it's random. It cuts across a bunch of different sectors, but we're always interested in having more data. And as you look at the data today, I'd like to let you know that you could do an analysis like this for your own organization, and this could be really interesting to you. So you can see our bios there, and if you have any questions about that, let us know. So let's move forward on this. And who knows, we might get done early and you can go home early today. So
let's see. Hey Joe, there's so much information, and you know the German like to dive into deeper information. So I hope we can make it in 1 hour. So let's see.
Well, and we're going to open it up for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have some questions to ask, go ahead and do that. There's also on the webinar there a chat box where you can type messages in, and that'd be another way of sending a message immediately, and so we can collect those too. Well, here's the basic information. We have data on 472 German leaders. They come from a variety of sectors, large businesses, small businesses. We compared them to both our global norm, and in that norm we have results from 85,000 leaders across the globe, and then to our European norm where we have 8,336 leaders. What we find is that Europeans tend to be more conservative in their ratings. You know, the North Americans are most generous, and the Europeans are more conservative. So far, we found that the toughest rater group in Europe are the French, and so the Germans are a little more optimistic than that. But when we compare you to our global norm, and we're calculating here percentile scores, and we're calculating a index here called the overall leadership effectiveness. And the overall leadership effectiveness is the summary of 49 items. These items or behaviors all measure what we think are differentiating factors that separated great leaders from poor leaders. So we think, and we know this particular measure is an excellent indicator of a manager's effectiveness. Now, as we compare you to the rest of the world, you come out at the 39th percentile. And as you see those based on the global norms there, 68% of the sample there are below average and 32% above average. But you can see the range of scores there run from the 1st to the 95th percentile. So what we found in Germany were some of the best leaders we've ever met, ever been acquainted with, that they are spectacular. And we found some leaders that needed some work. Now, when we compare you to Europeans, what we find is that you're at the 53rd percentile. Now, the average would be the 50th. So you're 3 percentile points above the average. So doing a little bit better than most European leaders. So what we think that's happening here is with the kind of the more conservative rating, we think that basically the leaders in Germany are about as good and about as effective as the leaders that we found across the globe. Now, a little bit about our norms. We tend to work with progressive, well-managed, successful companies. We don't work with companies that are really, you know, not very progressive and not very interested in development. And so because of that, these are some of the best companies in the world. And so we do feel like our norms are high. So being average in that respect is pretty good. Because as you look at the peer group there, you would find an excellent group of leaders. Now, let me show you another slide that gives you an indication of where that falls compared to others and how it looks. And if we look at this compared to others across the globe, here's how we'd see you. The Americans, they come out at about the 58th percentile on average. So in the United States, people tend to be very generous. And as you see across here, the Asians at the 44th, Canadians at the 41st, Middle East at the 40th. So Germany comes in at the 38th, right, 0.7. Central South America, 37th, Europe in general at the 36th, and then Africa at the 35th. So kind of right in the middle of the pack there in terms, and like I said, within that sample, we have some of the best leaders we've ever measured, and some that are needing assistance or needing improvement. Now, we did an interesting study where we looked at male versus female leaders. If you go to our webinar, or to our if you go to hbr.org, and if you look at a blog from Zenger Folkman, what you'll find is that we have a blog, a bunch of blogs where we compared males to females. And the surprising thing that we found was, well, it wasn't surprising to females, but it was to males, that we found that women were actually rated higher on average than male leaders. And in fact, when we broke that down a little further, and this is across the globe, we found that on 13 of our 16 competencies, women were more effective. Men were more effective on 2, and I call them the big 2 because I'm an insecure male, but men were more effective on 2, and women were more effective on 13 of the 16 competencies. So we found a significant difference, and we wondered if in fact women were rated higher in Germany. Now, you can see in the US or in the global sample that we have about an equal number of men and women, 40,000 compared to 22,000. I'm sorry, they're not equal. We have about half the number of women as men. But we're looking at males 388 and females 66. So our sample, your sample is a lot smaller. But when we looked at those women, we did find that they on average rated higher. That difference isn't statistically significant, but I do think the trend might hold up. And as you look closer and you see that impact, and that's an interesting study. That's one where we'd love to get more data in Germany on men versus women and understand that a little bit better. But we are seeing that trend, and there's some interesting questions there I'm sure you'll have about that trend and what happens.
Joe, if I can pick this up, I think that's a huge discussion here in Germany. And for me, this number shows probably a little bit the situation in Germany, that we have much less leaders in Germany, female than male. And I think that's probably, it's not a big number what we are having there, but I think it's showing a little bit the trend we are having, that not enough female leaders are in that kind of position. It is basically C-level management. So that's probably an idea what I got out of it.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing trends across the globe. We're doing a lot of work in Japan, and with their declining birth rate, one of the things they sort of recognize is that in order for them to sort of run businesses, they're going to have more women in the workforce. And of course, that opened lots of questions around how, when they looked at the responsibilities that men and women have in the household, they found that, well, as you probably know, in most cultures, women do the majority of the work in the home. And in Japan, it was they do 3/4 of the work in the home, so part of what has to change in the culture is the balance of responsibilities and work needed to change in order for women to be able to go to work. But yes, I think that's going to be a trend, and I think, and it's a good trend. The other thing that we find is that as we look at that difference between men and women, that the women all say, well, if we're better leaders, why aren't more of us promoted? Well, that's another good question, but one of the things we're saying from our data is that if you're thinking about promoting someone and you have a male candidate and a female candidate, our data suggests that that female candidate may be every bit as effective as the male candidate. So there's a good chance they are. This looks at the ratings by rater group. So we got data from managers, peers, direct reports, others, and of course the matrix manager, which is a lot of times that they're available. What's interesting here is a little bit of a difference from our global data, and especially our US data, in that the direct report group tended to rate a little bit lower, slightly lower, than the manager and peer rater group. The matrix manager was the lowest rater group, and that is consistent with our data. But one of the things we've got here is this trend in Germany that direct reports tend to be a little more, they're a little more critical, and maybe their expectations are a little bit higher, and maybe their satisfaction is a little bit lower. So that's different. In the US, we find the direct reports tend to be higher. And actually, the lowest rater group globally are the peers. They tend to be a tough rater group, and they're slightly higher in Germany. So that's interesting. Not big differences between any of the rater groups there. Now, in our 360 assessment, we also measure employee commitment. We do that with 5 items. And these don't focus on the manager, they focus on the organization. The items are: I feel confident the organization will achieve its strategic goals. My work environment is a place where people want to go the extra mile. I'd recommend this organization as a place to work. I rarely think about quitting my job and going to a different organization. All in all, I'm satisfied with this organization as a place to work. And from those 5 items, we found that we can accurately assess the engagement level of the direct reports of a manager. Now, what you see there is, based on our global norm, we put engagement at the 39th percentile, and based on the European norm, the 48th percentile. So again, as you kind of look at that, you can see that in Europe, what we'd say is the engagement of employees in Europe is about at an average level, albeit a little bit lower than the 50th percentile. But as you saw here on the rater groups, you notice that the direct reports, the direct report rater group was at about the 48th percentile also, so the 39th percentile. So, that's what's drawing it down a little bit, is that they're rating a little bit lower. But one of the things that we know about this is that is a good indicator of how engaged people are. And engagement really is a great predictor of success in an organization. And I'll show you the impact of this as we look at leadership effectiveness. But I wanted to show you this, where we looked at the results on these 5 questions. And what's interesting about it is the highest rated item here is what we call our discretionary effort item. My work environment is a place where people want to go the extra mile. And then I'm satisfied with this organization. Rarely think about quitting. I'd recommend this organization is a good place to work. The lowest rated item, and there's quite a gap there between the others and that one, 35th percentile. And this is based on our global norm. I'm confident the organization will achieve its strategic goals. And what's interesting about that is I think that's a reflection of kind of the world economy right now, what's going on with global competition. Maybe Brexit, falls into this, all this worry or concern about will our goods and services, will we be able to achieve the kind of market we have? And it looks like there's some concern around that. Frank, did that surprise you as you look at that?
I agree with you. I think in the moment, other studies are showing the same direction, that people are concerned what's going on globally, and also on the automotive side, you see a lot of things here in Germany, and also on from the politics side. I think there are many homework they have to do, and they are talking about crisis. And the Germans are, if you compare them to the US, they are not so positive thinking. They are more critical and skeptical, generally speaking. So that's showing exactly, in my opinion, that's direction.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's cautious, and that's what we see in the marketplace. Now, what's interesting is we looked at the percent of people that think about quitting. And this is, for us, is a really interesting indicator of engagement or commitment. And in our global norms, about 30% think about quitting. In Germany, about 33%. So what we find is that generally in a company, turnover would be about half of that. Okay, and so if 33% of the people are thinking about quitting, turnover would be about 15% of people might leave. And again, this is going to vary a lot from organization to organization. And I think in general, turnover in Germany is lower, and people tend to be more loyal. Is that changing, Frank, do you think?
Yeah, if you take a look to the new generation, we can see that they have other focus, other goals, and they are more looking what is the company bringing to them, and if there's a new chance, new opportunity, they are switching faster than the generation did it before. I'm with you.
Yeah, so we've seen turnover increase a little bit in some organizations that have had fairly stable turnover. Again, what's the problem with turnover? Well, the problem is you can't hire somebody who has an absolute clear knowledge of your organization, an absolute clear knowledge of a specific job responsibility, who has experience in a network with other people in the company. That you can't hire them, because the person you hire might have a lot of experience in other companies, but they don't have the experience in your company. So all the training and all the work that you did preparing these people walks out the door when you lose people. So unemployment right now in the U.S. is around, 3 or 4%. It's very low. And so what we're seeing in the U.S. is this war for talent. I mean, Frank, do you know what unemployment is in Germany?
It is around, I think, for 5%. It's a difference, of course, east and west. There's a big difference there, but that's generally speaking the situation.
Yeah, so it's getting lower, and so keeping good people is important. And again, if you're dissatisfied, if you're frustrated with your manager, we find that's one of the reasons why people will quit. And again, we'll show you the data on that. Now, we ask in the assessment, we measure 16 competencies. And this is a list, and what we've ordered these, we sorted them from the most positive competency to the least positive competency. And what you see here is that when we compare you to our global norms, your most positive competency is championing change, drives for results, strategic perspective, takes initiative, technical professional expertise. Those are your most positive competencies. And if you look at the bottom of the list, you can see the least positive competencies. The lowest rated one there is practices self-development. That's the extent to which people enjoy learning. They ask for feedback. They're very focused on their own development. The next one is establishes stretch goals, the extent to which, you ask people to sort of reach a difficult target, and then developing others, and then collaboration and teamwork. So those are the 4 lowest, 4 highest. You kind of see those. Now, some interesting things happen when we compare you to the European norms. Because remember how collaboration was on the bottom of the list? Collaboration goes to the top of the list. So compared to Europeans, you guys are spectacular. You're more collaborative than most Europeans, which is interesting, but in the global norms, it was on the bottom. Rise for results, champions change, taking initiative, displays integrity and honesty. You notice strategic perspective is now down 6th place. And then at the bottom of the list, we have practices self-development, develops others, innovates, inspires, and motivates others. So it depends on, who you're compared to, how these come out, and how they're sorted through here. Notice that the lowest practice self-development relative to our European norms, you guys were right at the average on that, and 55th percentile on collaboration and teamwork. Now, let's look at the raw data here. These are the scores, the raw scores from the rating scales here. And it gives us a different order here, and some things are really consistent. So at the top of the list, takes initiative, displays integrity and honesty, technical expertise, drive for results, problem solving. So those are the things, and you can see those top 4. There's a delta there where they're higher. But again, at the bottom of the list, what do you see? Practices self-development. So that was consistent. That was always last. Inspires and motivates others, collaboration and teamwork, and develops others. So what's interesting is that we ask people to indicate which of these 16 was most important. And this next chart shows us the importance rating.
Joe, if you can go once back. For me, this page is showing some typical made in Germany challenges we are having. I think we are very good on a technical and professional expertise. That's where made in Germany or made in Swiss or made in Austria is.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Driving for results makes sense, solve problems and things like that. But for me, what I'm definitely seeing also in our daily work, one thing that you have been mentioned to it, practice self-development is always last. And there's a big difference, I think, also to the US. In the US, if you are a manager, it's normal that you have a coach. In Germany or in Europe, if you have a coach, people are asking, is something wrong with you? It's a completely different mindset. And for me, especially inspiring and motivating, what is the key competence worldwide is on the second last one. And I think that's a huge thing that's in the future extremely important for the generation Y and Z and things like that. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we have been focusing here, that the social competence, the people competence, that this is not a typical European German competence. We are more on technical results and problem solving. And I think that's where we have to focus for the next years. Do you see the same thing, or can you agree with that?
Absolutely agree. And what you find is again, sometimes we refer to drive for results as push. And if that's push, right? And push, you know, what you do to push is you give people direction, you tell them what to do, you give a lot of direction and ask people and hold people accountable. That's a good thing. But what you see down at the bottom with inspires, if drives for results is push, what inspires and motivates others, that's pull.
Big difference.
We're good at pushing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not so good at pulling. By the way, that is consistent across the globe. I mean, inspires and motivates others is typically one of the lowest competencies in terms of effectiveness, and much. So we're better at pulling than pushing than pulling, and that's if we can help. And I think you're absolutely right. Learning that skill and learning the collaboration and teamwork skill and that develops others. These are all skills that are critical. And again, when we look at the importance ratings, what's most important? Push. Right? What's second most important? Pull. Now, it is interesting to look at what's rated the least important, practicing self-development. That was your point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we don't think we need a coach. We don't think we need to develop. But if you think about athletes and great people who have done well, they had coaches, and that's a common theme. So we find these results interesting, and by the way, we ask people to, by the importance rating, we ask them to select the 4 competencies that they felt were most important for them, for the managers or for the leaders to do well, to be successful in their current jobs. I think people want to be inspired, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think that drive for results is good, but they also that idea of that energy and that enthusiasm and it's the why of what we need to do that helps people do that. So anything else on that list, Frank, that you see that's
No, exactly. I think that's the key thing. And on the page before, integrity and honestly is on the second highest one. That's a very positive thing, I think. And I remember that you have been doing a study with an international technology company in the States, and this one was on the lowest point. So they have a different problem, of course. Yeah. But in Europe, and I think especially with this 500 leaders here from Europe, we had many family-owned medium-sized companies. And especially in the medium-sized family-owned companies, the integrity, the honestly, the value and the culture is a very high value there. and that's exactly what we can see here. And I think it's a very positive thing what I pick out here.
Well, let me give you a sense of the impact of leadership effectiveness. So here's the theory. We create an assessment and a set of competencies that we believe that if people were good and did well on these competencies, that it would affect outcomes. And the theory is the better you perform on these set of competencies, the more that it would affect the profitability and success and outcomes of the business. So better leaders, better results. That's our theory, right? And so if we look at, again, this is just based on the results from Germany. And if we look at leadership effectiveness, you see on the graph there, the overall leadership effectiveness, the bottom 10%, next 25, middle 30, next 25, top 10. And we look at employee commitment or engagement. The key is that if you have a poor leader, a leader that rates very low on these 16 competencies, the engagement of those employees, it's at the 19th percentile. And I'd ask folks on the webinar to think about if they've ever had a really bad boss. Have you ever worked for a really terrible boss? And what was it like? Now, I ask this of groups all over the world, and usually a lot of people have had a bad boss in their life, and when you ask them what it was like, they say it was terrible. I hated it. It was awful. And a lot of times people say, and I left. But if you have a bad boss, you have a disengaged, frustrated, angry, upset employee. Now, what's interesting is you can take the same organization, same compensation, same pay, same job, but if we swap out the bad boss for a good boss, middle 30, what we find is engagement goes up to the 42nd percentile. And if you swap out that boss for a really great boss, engagement goes up to the 67th percentile. Change the boss, change the engagement. As engagement goes up, profitability goes up, satisfaction goes up, all kinds of good things happen. Frank, any experience with that in Germany? You probably experienced that yourself.
Absolutely. We're always saying good people, they are not going to a company or they're not staying with a company, they're staying with the boss. And that's exactly why inspiration, motivation, and the emotional connection is so important. And I also remember when we did a study in Germany about automotive leaders, it was extremely strong that we see there was very poor managers, and over 60% of the team was quitting their job mentally, or they left the organization. And at the top leaders, the top 10, there was zero people they have been thinking about quitting or really leaving the company. So that's definitely numbers we can prove here in the German market. Yes.
And you mentioned this idea that if you have a bad boss, the possibility that you might quit goes up. And again, this chart shows again the effectiveness of the leader and the percentage of people that are thinking about quitting. So we actually find that 50% of your employees, if you have a really bad leader in Germany, and this is just German data, are thinking about quitting if you have a bad boss. If you have a great boss, only 13% are thinking about quitting. Now, as a psychometrician, that's what I am, I look at that graph and I start to drool. That is a lovely trend, but it's a very powerful trend. And what it's demonstrating here is, again, our assessment really predicts outcomes. And now another outcome that I think is critical is this last one here. And this is measuring something we call discretionary effort. Here's what happens. Every day, every employee, when they come to work, makes a decision. Am I going to give you the least amount of effort possible to keep my job? Am I going to give you a little bit more than that? Or am I going to give you all my energy, all my effort, all my enthusiasm? Am I going to give you 100%? This is the percentage of people that are willing to give 100%. And as you see, the better the leader, the more likely it is that you're going to get a high percentage of your people willing to give 100% of their effort. Now, what that translates to me to is profitability, is productivity. Because, Peter Drucker said if you could increase productivity by 10%, it would double the profits of most organizations. So this really is, I mean, when you think about it, when you have a bad boss, you have an employee who is dissatisfied, who's thinking about quitting, and not very likely to give you all of their energy and effort. Frank, you've probably seen that a lot in your work too. So as we look at this data here, if you're not confused yet, I put this slide in here.
No, that's one of my favorite slides here. Especially if I ask German managers how they see themselves, what is important, and what are the top 10 behaviors the direct report sees. I think it's amazing. Huh?
Yeah. So what we did was we created a correlation coefficient where we correlated individual behaviors with employee engagement. And so, as Frank was saying, well, what do leaders do that have high engagement? How do they act? Now, these are sorted by the correlation coefficient, but let me sort of put this together for you. If you look at item 19 and 20, okay, establishes high standards, and 20 is skillful at getting people to stretch. It's fascinating to me that this skill of setting a stretch goal for your group and getting the people to accomplish and embrace that stretch goal, that behavior actually drives up the engagement level of employees. Asking your people to do more and getting them to embrace that actually increases engagement. Now, that's opposite of what a lot of managers think. A lot of managers think that if I ask you to work harder and to do more, you're going to be less engaged. But what this data really confirms is that people want to be successful. They want to accomplish a lot. They want to do things that are hard. Well, if you ask them, they won't say that. But when they do it, they feel like they're alive and they're really making a difference. Now, if you look at another two items, 40 helps people understand the organization's vision and objectives so they can translate them into challenging and meaningful goals. And then 42 at the bottom of the list has a perspective beyond the day-to-day. Both of those items talk about this idea that people know where they're going. They are clear about the vision. They have a good sense of that. And managers just don't do that often enough. They don't help people sort of focus on here's why we're doing this, and here's the impact of that. And leaders that did that more, that keep people focused on here's why we're doing this, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing, That really makes a difference. The next item, 27, look at 27 and 25. Both of those talk about communication. And, you know, we imagine that we communicate well, but we don't let people know the what, the when, the where, and the how. And we've actually found this is the easiest skill to improve. Communicating powerfully and prolifically is the easiest skill to improve. Item 15 gets at this idea of continual improvement. It's one of those items in that practice of self-development. You know, people want to get better. They want to learn a skill. They want to develop. And that's that item. And then you can see item 1 is a role model. That's a good example. Frank, are there other things that you see in here that you want to focus on?
No, I'm with you. The 40 with a strong vision that goes in the same direction than inspiring and motivating. There's a clear vision, clear goals, and things like that. And I agree with you with the high standards. That's like you have it in sport teams. People love it to be a professional team, be committed, working on big goals and things. I'm with you, but I did a copy of this page and I discussed it in different management teams. And when you ask them what they think, what kind of behavior people are expecting was completely different. So it's really showing what is important and on which things we have to work and what the colleagues and employees are really looking for a professional boss. So for me, it's fantastic. It's showing for me leadership is not magic. It's very clear, not kind of simple, but it's very clear, skillful, and important. That the boss is a role model, that they live their talk, and are very strong in communication and connecting with the people. It's the social skills, it's the people skills, and a big thing what we see in Germany. We have not, you see that on the politic also, we have not big visionaries in Germany, and that's something what's coming out here too. It's important to have somebody who is having the lead, that this is a guy who has a vision, a mission, a big picture where we are going, and he is showing as a role model that he is believing that and standing behind that. Fantastic.
Yeah. And one more I should mention, which is item 28. That is an inspires and motivates others item, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have both the push and the pull here. You have the, 19 and 20 are the push, let's do more, let's accomplish something that's difficult. And then 28 is the pull, energizes people to achieve exceptional results. And that's that passion and that energy that again, managers can use. Well, let me charge on here as we look at this. One of the things that we got interested in was a lot of times when you assess a leader's effectiveness, their tendency is to focus on what's wrong. And one of the things that we thought was interesting was this idea that it's not always about what's wrong, but what's right. What are people doing well? And so we wanted to look at the impact of strengths with German leaders. And this is just German data. And a strength was defined as having a competency at the 90th percentile. And so if people had no strengths, their average effectiveness rating was the 34th percentile. Now, let's say that you did one thing well, that you were really good at one of the competencies, and we measured 16. What would the effect of that be? Well, we know overall effectiveness would go up. Well, how much? Well, 1/16, a little bit. Well, it turns out if you did one thing well, you move from the 34th percentile to the 60th percentile. You almost double your overall leadership effectiveness. And leaders that did three things well were in the top quartile. They were at the 78th percentile. If you did 5 things well, you were in the 86th percentile. What this did for us, and what we know, is that even though we think about improvement is focusing on what's wrong, this idea that if we focus on what's right, if we develop these profound strengths, they have a substantial impact on our effectiveness. And you know, as we challenge leaders, and Frank does this all over Germany, he helps you think about what could be your profound strengths. If you can do 3 things well, you're in the top quartile of leaders across the world here. If you did just 3 things well. Frank, would you add to that at all?
No, I'm 100% with you. Very often when I speak to manager, I get the feedback, I have to be perfect in everything. And of course, nobody can do that. And we have that example in the extraordinary leadership program with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was not perfect at all, but he was excellent in 3, 4, 5 maximum competences, and that helped him bringing the organization to this high level. And I think that's important to bring that over. And also when I work with students, I tell them also, hey, listen, you don't have to be perfect. Focus on your passion, focus on some key competencies and bring that up to a high level. That helps you bringing you up in the big league or in the top league. Yeah.
Well, not everybody is perfect. What's interesting, and it is fascinating to me, in general, in our global data, about 30% of leaders have something we call a fatal flaw. And again, what we're saying is, well, you don't need to focus on weaknesses, but a fatal flaw is worse than a weakness. It's a competency at the bottom, in the bottom 10%. And it is interesting, you know, because of the focus on, oh, we can't have anything wrong. In Germany, actually, only 25% of leaders have fatal flaws. Now, you know, again, in our global data, 30%. So it's less. But we would say that, and one of the things that we do in our assessment is that we tell people to build their strengths unless they have a fatal flaw. And the impact of a fatal flaw is people with 1 or more fatal flaw, their average effectiveness is at the 21st percentile. So it's a negative impact. Frank, I'm sure as you work with leaders, you find some leaders that do have flaws, and this is where people need to correct them.
Absolutely.
So how effective are you as a leader? If you go to your folks, your leaders, and you say, how effective do you think you are? I think what they'll say is, I'm pretty good. I'm okay. I'm pretty good. Actually, if you ask people if they're above average driver, you realize that about 90% of people say they are above average in terms of being a driver. Frank?
But these are German numbers. These are German numbers, or the 90% of drivers.
Frank actually is at the 90th percentile as a driver, aren't you, Frank? Because you are a great driver.
Yes, I'm in motorsport, so I have very good coaches where I was working on it. Absolutely.
Yeah. But would you say that German drivers are 80 or 90% of them are also above average?
That's what they think.
But we all experience that a little bit differently. Our self-perception's different. I sat down with a group recently. They were in the medical area. They were selling drugs, and I asked the group, how effective are you as a group? And they said, you know, we're really a great group. We're probably at the 80th percentile. I said, well, about half of that here at the 45th percentile. We think we're better than we are. Or we think we're worse than we are. We looked at the effectiveness of a leader in predicting their own effectiveness, and we found that other people were twice as accurate at estimating your effectiveness than you were. We either overestimated or underestimated our effectiveness. Your leaders don't know. They don't know if they're the greatest leader on earth or the worst. And if you want to help your leaders, give them some feedback. Our recommendation is to participate in a 360 assessment. That's the only way we know of where you can get an accurate estimation of how effective you are as a leader. And if you do that, you can attend this workshop where we'll help you understand your data, understand where they are as a leader. They'll create an action plan for improvement. And we find that 85% of the people that create an action plan actually improve one or more of the competencies. And that's what we ask them to do in the development process. So this is a very helpful process. And we think that if you really want to develop leadership in your organization, this is the way to do it. Frank, what would you add to that?
Yes, we have some open programs where we invite leaders from different organizations, or we do it internally, or there's a possibility that we do a coaching session with them. And I agree. I think the most important thing is the self-perception and the perception of others. That's a big aha effect we have with the 360 reports. And after this, we are working on the cross-training concept, working on strengths. I think it's an outstanding program. It's helping people grow much faster and be focused on the real important, or the most important things, than just going to different kind of seminars and things like that. So I'm standing 100% behind it. And also in your book, Extraordinary Leadership, we have that concept. I love it. Absolutely. And I can prove it that it is working. Yes.
So in general, 51% of leaders improve their overall effectiveness. And what we did was this final slide here is show you that the leaders with fatal flaws in a study of 3,000 leaders here went from the 18th, and again, with this improvement process, went up to the 40th percentile. And those that didn't have a fatal flaw, they built strengths, but they moved on average from the 55th to the 75th percentile. Well, if we want to improve leadership, I think the way to do that is you measure yourself, you find out where you're at, and you get a development plan for improvement. We know this works, and Frank, you've seen this work in organizations. So we're about out of time here on this, but I want to open it up for questions that people had or comments.
Perfect, Joe. Thank you very much. Very impressive data, and the data shows us what's really going on in company. And quite often we had a situation that people are saying, yeah, this is US, this is international, Germany is different. But now these figures are really showing how is the situation in Germany. And I think it's very clear, especially I like very much the inspiring and motivating competence, or it's showing personal development, that there is a big thing to do. I'm 100% with you. I have two questions. Sure, we are running out of time, but if you have two short answers. When you presented the female and male study, you have been saying there are two competencies where the male have been better, but there are over 13 competencies where the females have been better, and I know we have a white paper about it. If you take a look to the German numbers, what are the two top competences of the males and the females?
You know, I don't know in the German data, but in our global data, I think these match up. But the two competencies that males tend to be better at are strategic perspective and technical expertise.
Exactly.
Those tend to be competencies that males were more effective at.
And especially the other ones, they are more on social competencies or emotional competencies. Of course, the females are much better. Okay, I agree with you. My last question. Sorry.
You know, what's fascinating is the number one highest rated from females is taking initiative. I mean, you know, relationship building and collaboration and teamwork and developing others. Yes, they were better on that. But the number one biggest difference was taking initiative, and females tend to do that. That's a very important competency. So that's interesting.
Okay, absolutely. My last question, time is running, of course, so we could do it, I think, for a few hours, the whole program. Do you see any competencies that are getting more and more important when we are talking about the different generation Y and Z and things like that? Is there anything that you can see as a trend? What this kind of people are looking for is most important or something like this?
Well, you know, I think this really speaks to some of the things you already said, but I think the inspiring and motivating competency is one that you know, they don't want a job. They want to make a difference. They want to change the world. Okay.
Yes.
And that is, you know, that's this inspiring and motivating competency, and that's critical. The other thing they want to do, if you look at it, is they want to develop. They want to grow. They don't want a job where they're just doing the same thing. They want to grow and develop and learn. And that developing others, you can see that, and then the practicing self-development, which are two sides of the same coin. You know, they will ask for feedback. We found that younger people tend to ask for feedback more often, and as you age, that tends to go down. But developing others, taking people under your wing, and having leaders have a mindset around, I need to develop my people. Those are, I think they look for that. They look for organizations that are going to do that and going to find a way to enforce that.
Okay, excellent, Joe. Thank you very much. I think that was very important to share this study. Our plan is we will write off a white paper about all the data. There are more data behind it. We will work on this. And I think for everybody, here's my email and also the contact information of Joe. If there is anything you need, of course, you can have the presentation. We can send you some of the white papers we have done before. We have also the white paper, male and female. Just send us an email, and we will be more than happy to share this information with you. Or if you are interested about an assessment tool, assessment concept, or using the 360 or anything in a diagnostic world for yourself, let us know. We are more than happy to help you, and let's stay in touch. And Joe, once again, thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. As always, a pleasure for me working together with you. We spent a lot of time in Switzerland and Germany, and always the people liked your leadership style, and especially what we in Europe, or especially in Germany, really focused on it is the real data, we call it meat on the bone, behind everything you are doing. So thank you very much. We appreciate and all the best. Enjoy your day, and greetings from Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.